Chapter 5. The monsoon rains had come. Billowing clouds of purple, indigo, and midnight blue were streaked with repeated flashes of lightning. Bass rumbles of thunder resonated across the sky. Although traveling in monsoon season was hard, I inhaled the moist, warm air and was thrilled. July was approaching, and I wondered where to go for my next visa extension. There was a rumor that one could easily get an Indian visa in Nepal. Considering that it was not very far away, I decided to try. On my journey northeast toward Nepal, I arrived in Patna, a bustling city of huge granaries, colleges, and political buildings in the state of Bihar. I meandered to the river Ganges and slept on the river's bank at the Collectory Ghat, where Mother Ganges looked as wide as a sea and was awakened by the rays of the rising sun and the sound of hundreds of people singing songs while preparing to take their baths. I lay there, taking in this colorful display, when suddenly I sensed an overpowering presence. There, towering over me, was a marvelous-looking man with long white hair and beard. I felt to be face to face with a classical holy man of ancient lore. 3 vertical lines called tilak were drawn on his forehead. The center line was red and the other 2 white. Perhaps in his late 70s, he spoke no English, but pressing his hands together and bowing in greeting, gestured for me to follow him into his temple on the riverbank. Not bigger than a large hut, the gray stone temple looked very old. Its front was open to the river, and as he entered, I saw a man who appeared in his mid-80s, sitting before an altar, reciting prayers. He greeted me in fluent English. "My name is Narayan Prasad. I hail from Patna." He began to tell me his story. "Now that my children are grown, I am retired from government service and come here each day to serve my guru." Taking my hand, he led me to the same holy man who'd found me lying on the riverside. "This is my guru, Radhanath Swami. He is a great bhakti yogi." I knew by now that bhakti meant devotion, but I had no idea yet the depth or true meaning of this tradition. The Swami invited me to remain at his temple as long as I wished. He was to be the first sadhu who followed the path of bhakti yoga I would stay with. Like a loving father, he carefully considered my welfare. A gentle smile beamed from his aged face every time he looked at me. Although 4 times my age, he fed me with his own hands. Later, when I was ill, he prepared herbal medicines for me. He was a revered Swami, and I, a lost little soul, a Western kid struggling to find my way. My heart was moved seeing the devotion of Radhanath Swami. It was from him that I learned much about the behavior of an honest and genuine holy man. Simplicity and devotion poured from his heart in whatever he did. Each morning he spent several hours alone, chanting the names of Lord Rama on his wooden beads and performing his daily worship on the altar with great feeling. One day he explained to me the meaning of his name. Ram Sevak means one who serves Lord Rama, and the greatest service to Rama is to help others to know him and love him. He stroked his flowing white beard and became emotional. I am indebted to you for allowing me to help you, he said. Hearing this, even Narayan Prasad was overcome with emotion and had to struggle to speak the translation. As for me, I was only beginning to grasp the true meaning of devotion. At night, as we all slept on the jagged stone floor of the temple, swarms of bloodthirsty mosquitoes tormented me. I felt I was being eaten alive. Their buzzing agitated my ears. Zeroing in, they stabbed into my flesh and sucked my blood. It was impossible to sleep. In distress, I looked over at Ram Sevak Swami and a visiting sadhu. Even though mosquitoes swarmed around them and grew plump with their blood, they lay peacefully on the rocks, sleeping soundly. These two sadhus were completely oblivious to bodily suffering. I prayed to God that someday I might be so detached. One evening, a visiting sadhu offered to cook for us. After begging alms in town, he returned, and while crouching on the floor, he started a fire with the fuel of dried cow dung patties that heated a clay pot. He cooked khichdi made of rice, mung, and some potatoes. His complexion was dark, his hair and beard matted, and he wore only a faded white loincloth. When he finished cooking, he offered the food first on the altar and then to us. I sat on the floor in a row with Ram Sevak Swami and 3 other sadhus. As our cook heaped a ladle full of khichdi on each plate, we chanted songs and praise of Lord Rama and prepared to eat. We ate with our fingers from a leaf plate. With the first bite, my mouth blazed. It was as if the cook had spiced the chili peppers with a little rice. I was sweating profusely. My nose ran, and tears streamed from my eyes. It felt like the remaining wax in my ears was melting. I despaired, for according to sadhu custom, one must complete everything on one's plate. At that moment, my only goal in life was to somehow finish my plate. The pain was excruciating, and I hiccuped uncontrollably. I ate mouthful after mouthful of that blistering dish in sheer anguish. The others were enjoying it so much they never could have dreamed of my suffering. Just as I managed to choke back the last of my portion and feel the promise of relief, our generous cook came around to give seconds. I blocked my plate with my hands. Puran, Puran, I am full, no more. He smiled with the ladle brimming over, ready to fill my plate. Tora, Tora, a little, take just a little more. I felt as if I were standing before death personified, pleading for my life. Puran, Puran! My hands protectively covered my plate. Tora, Tora! With a gracious smile, he performed the fateful deed. He dropped the contents of the ladle on my plate. My mind reeling, I somehow completed the fiery food and breathed a sigh of relief. Just then, I saw him returning with thirds. I knew I couldn't survive another plate. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't. The etiquette among sadhus is that no one gets up until all others have completed. He dipped the ladle into the pot and filled it with what looked like a ladle full of chilies. Ever since I was a child, I had always felt bad when I caused other people sorrow. So intent was the cook on pleasing us that I didn't have the heart to reveal the pain that he was causing me. My pulse was racing. What could I do? In haste, I lifted my plate and crumpled it into my hands. He smiled and went on to the next sadhu. Amazed, I watched all the others thoroughly enjoying helping after helping. The cook pointed to me and bragged. He likes my cooking so much, he is crying in gratitude. I forced a smile and nodded in agreement, while reflecting on the philosophy of selfless service that was so much a part of these men's lives. I thought, yes, I am crying, and it may as well be in gratitude as he believes. To please others is not always easy, but it is a part of my deepest nature to wish to do this. Enduring the burning pain of that food was a small price to please this sadhu. That night, the mosquitoes hardly bothered me. Perhaps my blood was too spicy. While in Patna, Narayan Prasad became a dear friend of mine. As it goes with friends, he was eager for me to meet a dear friend of his, a doctor who operated an X-ray clinic. One day the doctor welcomed us into his office and invited us to sit around his desk. Although born a Hindu, he was disillusioned by prejudice against lower castes, and largely for this reason, he converted to Islam. He was now a scholar of the Holy Quran and accepted the name Muhammad. He continued to accept the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, but did not want to be affiliated with a religion that discriminated against people on the basis of their birth. I challenged him. But the Gita doesn't discriminate on the basis of one's birth. Many of the greatest saints of the Hindus were born of lower castes. The Bhagavad Gita teaches we are not material bodies, but immortal souls. Together we discussed the true basis of religion, examining the parallels of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, and the Quran. We continued to meet thereafter, and without bias or prejudice, we enriched each other with dialogue. He didn't try to convert me to Islam, and I didn't try to convert him either. Rather, with mutual respect, we shared our realizations. In our dialogue, I could feel the mercy of God flowing through each of the great scriptures, saints, and religions in a special way. I was becoming more and more aware that no matter what one's path and no matter how narrow it became, in broadest terms, sincere devotion to God was the only way to overcome the strife and division of the world. Sitting on the bank of the Ganges one day, after a talk with Mohammed, I inquired of Narayan Prasad, "How is it that you have so much affection for someone from another religion in a country where there is so much conflict between the two?" With a warm smile, he said something I have never forgotten. A dog will recognize his master in whatever way he dresses. The master may dress in robes, suit and tie, or stand naked, but the dog will always recognize his master. If we cannot recognize God, our beloved master, when he comes in a different dress from another religion, then we are less than that dog. As I had stayed longer with Ram Sevak Swami than I'd planned, I hiked to the Foreign Immigration Office in Patna to try for an extension. The office was nothing more than a small brick house with an old man behind a desk. There were hardly any filing cabinets. Most of the papers and records were piled high on the official's desk and floor. He searched through these piles for 15 minutes before he found the application form. After filling out the application, I handed over my passport. He studied it for a moment, then in a flat, bureaucratic tone said, "Your visa cannot be extended beyond the current expiration date." His words left me dumbstruck. To leave my adopted motherland would be unbearable. I pleaded with him again and again, but he stuck to his official response. It seemed hopeless. I prayed. At that moment I saw a painting of Lord Rama on the wall behind him. Meekly I addressed the man. "Sir, in the country I come from, everybody eats cows." His jaw dropped and eyes opened wide. "What? Killing our sacred cow? How horrible!" "Sir, in the country I am from, boys and girls often live together without marriage." He shook his head in disapproval and clicked his tongue. "Uncivilized!" "I shudder to tell you this, sir, but no one in my country has ever even heard the name of Rama." He could not believe his ears. Reaching across the desk, he grabbed my hands in his and said, "You must never go back to that horrible place." "But if you don't extend my visa, I must go back to that place. I came to India to seek shelter of your beloved Lord Rama." He pushed his chair back, jumped up, and declared, "I am Rama's devotee. It is my duty to protect you." With these words, he stamped a new visa on my passport. Each morning at Ram Sevak Swami's ashram, 5 sadhus would gather in the temple to read in Hindi from the Ramayana, the story of Lord Rama. I could understand only a few words here and there, but Narayan Prasad promised me that he would translate whatever was spoken after the session. For 3 hours, the sadhus sat in rapt attention as emotions flooded their hearts. Sometimes they shook in laughter. Other times they wept with joy or sorrow. Still at other times they sat motionless in suspense, fear, and wonder. I was starving to hear the story that affected them so. When the discussion was complete, I begged Narayan Prasad, "Please tell me everything." We strolled out of the temple and sat on the bank of the Ganges, where he began the narration. "One morning," he said, "when Lord Krishna was a small baby, his mother Yashoda fed him milk from her breast. As she was doing so, she noticed that a pot of milk on the stove was boiling over. So after putting baby Krishna in a safe place, she ran to save it. Krishna did not like being put aside like this. To show that no one should have priorities above service to God, he displayed his heart-enchanting quality of naughtiness by breaking a clay butter pot and eating the butter. Then, stirring up even more trouble, he entered another room where he climbed on top of a wooden grinding mortar. From this height, Krishna could reach up to steal more butter from a clay pot suspended from the ceiling by ropes. While eating, to his full satisfaction, he fed butter to the local monkeys. Meanwhile, Yashoda searched for her child. Following his buttery footprints, she spied him, feeding the monkeys while glancing fearfully from side to side. She smiled. As she tiptoed toward him, Krishna caught a glimpse of her and fled. Yashoda, overwhelmed by motherly love, chased after him, and Krishna, pleased to be conquered by his devotee's love, agreed to be captured. His little body trembled with thought of punishment. Tears fell from his eyes, pleas for mercy from his lips. He promised to not steal butter again. Because Mother Yashoda had household chores to do and wanted to protect her baby, she attempted to bind him around the waist with a silk rope to the grinding mortar. But the rope was 2 inches too short, so she tied more rope to the original. Still, it was 2 inches too short. Her friends, the gopis, or cowherd women, brought more and more rope. No matter what they tried, the rope was always 2 inches too short. Seeing his mother, smiling with uncontrollable affection and perspiring from her work with the rope, flowers falling from her hair, Krishna finally agreed to be bound by her love. In this pastime, Krishna shows us that although he is the supreme controller of all universes, he finds the greatest pleasure in being bound by the love of his devotees. To my surprise, I found myself overwhelmed with joy and begged Narayan Prasad, "Please tell me more." "That's all we spoke today," he replied simply. "But the talk was over 3 hours. Please say more." "That's all that was spoken." The next day, thrilled by the story about Krishna as a child and by the devotees' enrapt attention to the lecture, I was even more eager to hear. When the meeting ended, Narayan Prasad and I sat on the banks of the Ganges, and once again he told me the same story of Krishna stealing butter. He would tell me no more, no matter how much I begged. With a mischievous smile, he replied, "That is all that was spoken." On the third day, during the talk, the emotions of the sadhus were wonderfully vibrant with devotion. Sitting on the bank of Mother Ganges, I looked long and level at Narayan Prasad, my translator. "I must hear what was spoken today." He narrated the exact same story of Krishna stealing butter that he told before. Upset, I challenged him. "Why are you doing this to me? Every day the talk goes on for 3 hours, but your story is only 10 minutes. Why do you deceive me?" "But that's all that was spoken." Anger stirred in my breast. Today I listened carefully. Not once was the name Krishna or Yashoda spoken. Now please, please, tell me. He smiled and remained calm. We only discussed baby Krishna stealing butter. Tears filled my eyes. Am I so unworthy that I am not permitted to hear? Seeing my distress, Narayan Prasad became sober. He gazed deeply into my eyes. Seeing your sincere tears, I will now tell you the reason. He paused for several minutes, then broke the silence. The first night that you came here, Ram Sevak Swami had a dream. Lord Rama appeared to him and spoke these words. This young boy is a devotee of Krishna, but he does not know it yet. You must not speak anything to him except the glories of Krishna. Vrindavan will be his place of worship. He will not believe you if you tell him this, but someday he will understand. The Ganges flowed forcefully as Narayan Prasad put his hand on my shoulder. Tears welled in his eyes as he tried to pacify me. My guru, Ram Sevak Swami, gave me an order. I am not to speak to you about anyone except Krishna. But all my life I've been a devotee of Rama. And although both Rama and Krishna are the same one supreme person who appeared in different forms at different times, the only story I properly know about Krishna is his stealing butter. He reached into his bag and pulled out a print of baby Krishna stealing butter and gave it to me. It charmed my heart. Still, I was unable to grasp what he said. Was I to worship Krishna, and in a place called Vrindavan? Because I could not understand it, I dismissed the idea out of hand. All I knew then was that I aimed to return to the caves of the Himalayas. I had stayed several weeks at Ram Sevak Swami's ashram, enchanted by his gentle manner and that of his followers. The day I was leaving, I bowed down to seek the Swami's blessings. He wanted to give me a gift, but what did he have to offer? Looking around, he noticed his own walking stick, and with a tearful smile, presented it to me. I was overcome with gratitude. Although it was nothing but a crude branch broken from a tree, it was a gift of love that meant more to me than all the fortune in the world. I accepted his sacred gift, and my eagerness to do so brought him joy. He spoke in a voice cracking with affection as Narayan Prasad translated. The scripture tells us that the stick of a devotee's mercy can save one from the greatest dangers. The stick was to become my constant companion.